Greetings. My name is Brady Whitton, and I welcome you to worship here at First United Methodist Church in Baton Rouge. I welcome those of you who are joining us at home or wherever you may be, and of course those of you who are here in our sanctuary. So today we are celebrating World Communion Sunday, which is a day that we gather at the Lord's table and remember that as we do, there are Christians all over the globe on different continents who speak different languages and come from different cultures and who even have different perspectives on the faith than we do. And yet we are reminded that we are one in Christ. We're also going to hear a kind of funny teaching of Jesus's that will help us learn how to love our neighbors just a little more fully.
Hear this reading from the Gospel of Matthew. Why do you see the speck in your neighbor's eye, but do not notice the log in your own eye? Or how can you say to your neighbor, "Let me take the speck out of your eye," while the log is still in your own eye? You hypocrite! First take the log out of your own eye, and then you will clearly see to take the speck out of your neighbor's eye. This is the gospel of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
So if you spend any time around this church, or if you have heard me preach more than just a few times, you'll know that in Matthew 22, Jesus gives us a command about three types of love. And this is really his way of summarizing all that God told Moses, all that God told the prophets. And Jesus tells us to love God and to love our neighbor as we love ourselves. And in that I see three kinds of love. And every time I talk about that with people, I think people hear that and they go, "Oh yeah, that's great. You know, love, that's what our world needs more of, right? If you look around at all the hurt and all the pain, I mean, we just need more love, right?" I actually found myself thinking about that old song, and it's an old one now that goes like this: "What the world needs now is what? Love. Sweet love," right? I actually challenged the band at the middle service to try to learn that one maybe by the end of the month. But it all sounds great, right? Yeah, we should love God. We should love our neighbors. Boy, if we would all just love each other, wouldn't the world be a better place? What do you think? Yeah. Until we start to realize, oh, wait a minute, love our neighbors. Does Jesus mean that we should love all of our neighbors, like every single one of them, like the neighbor whose dog menaces me through the fence when I'm in my own backyard? I gotta love that neighbor. The neighbor who has friends over and they clog up all the spots in the street and nobody can get through our neighborhood. The neighbor who is on the opposite side of the political spectrum for me. Does Jesus mean I have to love them too? What do you think? Yes. Right? I mean, Jesus takes this thing as far as it'll go. He says we're actually to love our enemies. But that's a whole nother sermon, right? So again, the answer is yes. Jesus calls us to really love our neighbors, but that's not as easy as it sounds. And so I'm beginning a series today that I'm calling How to Love Your Neighbors. And what I want us to look at are three teachings from the Bible that talk about how we should interact with our neighbors. I could probably have done 15, but we're going to stick with three. And there are three that I think particularly talk to the situation that we find ourselves in now in our country, where we are so divided on so many things. So in Matthew 7, Jesus poses a question. And he poses the question using a rather ridiculous image. And this is what he says. "Why do you see the speck in your neighbor's eye, but do not notice the log in your own eye?" And by the way, this is supposed to be funny. So can you imagine a person walking around and they've got this gigantic log or a plank sticking out of their eye, but they don't even know it's there, and yet they're walking around going up to other people and they're finding this little speck. You ever have one of those, like just a little speck in your eye and you can't get it out, you know? And so they've got a log and they're going around and trying to help other people and point out other people's specks. Do you see how ridiculous that image is? It's supposed to kind of go, that's just outrageous, isn't it? until we realize that that is a pretty accurate description of the way that most of us go through our lives. What Jesus is talking about is the tendency that we have to focus on the faults and shortcomings of others while barely taking any notice of our own, right? Let's be honest, it's just so easy to criticize other people, isn't it? I mean, it's so easy, and we almost make it into a sport. So speaking of sports, there's a game during football season that LSU fans play every single weekend, and it's what we do on Monday morning when we criticize the daylights out of whoever is the LSU coach, right? Doesn't matter whether they won us a championship the year before. On Monday, I call it the "What have you done for me lately" syndrome, right? What are you doing? So can you imagine a situation where it's the fourth quarter, LSU is down by 7 points, and they're in the red zone. It's 4th and 2, and they've just got a little bit to go, and Brian Kelly calls a run up the middle. And what are you doing? You're screaming at your television, or you're screaming at the field going, "Come on, Kelly, we pay you $10 million a year, and that's the best you can do?" Right? What have you done for me lately? And I think after this weekend, what we might ask is, hey, we could get Clark Lee, the coach from Vanderbilt. He's only $3 million a year, right? But again, it's so easy to criticize other people, right? Or how about this? How about if your spouse is driving someplace and you're in the passenger seat? And there's just everything in you that just can't help you. You have all of these helpful suggestions and helpful noises and helpful things that you could offer to the situation, and you just can't help yourself. Why are you going that way? Watch out, the light just turned red. Watch out for those people over there, right? I'm going to get in trouble with my wife who's sitting in the front row, but one of my favorite one-liners that I learned a long time ago is this. My wife drives everywhere we go. She just lets me hold the steering wheel. Told you I'm in trouble, right? Okay, so, and one of the places that we find ourselves just so easily criticizing others is in the realm of politics, isn't it? I mean, how many of you, when you look at the people who are on the other side of the aisle from you, will literally find yourselves going, "I can't believe that they think that way. Are they nuts? Are they crazy? Like, how is it possible that they can view the world in this way? Don't they see that if they keep going that direction, the way the world's going to end up? I mean, can't they see it? Right? It's just so easy, isn't it? So why are we so quick to judge others? Why is it so easy? And I want to suggest a few things. The first one is this: it makes us feel better. It really does make us feel better. So I want you to recognize something about, all of us have this. There's a part of our brains that I would call the rational, critical part of our brains. It kind of looks out over the world, and it kind of it's a fear protection type of thing, and we're looking for problems, and we're looking for faults, and we're looking for issues, and we're looking for dangers. And that's just a part of our brains, right? Got it? And isn't it so much easier, rather than kind of turn that inward, to just turn it out on to other people, and it helps us to feel better, right? It's easier to point out other people's problems and other people's faults because it gives me some relief from my own. Like I can look at other people and go, well, at least I'm not like them, right? It reminds me of something I heard Jeff Foxworthy say one time. He said, if you ever start to feel like you have the goofiest, craziest, most dysfunctional family on the planet, all you have to do is go to a state fair. Because after 5 minutes at the fair, you will realize, you know what? We're all right. We're pretty good. We're doing pretty good. So I think it makes us feel better. The second thing is, I think it's a way of playing the blame game. And again, it relieves us a little bit. So we've got some real problems in our world, don't we? Violence, hunger, poverty, drug addiction. I mean, the list could go on, right? Well, who's to blame? And how are we going to solve all these problems? And, if we turn that kind of question into us, I don't know, you kind of start to feel a little hopeless, start to feel a little cynical, right? But hey, you know what? It's those people's fault. It's them. They're the ones that are doing it. And by blaming others, we kind of get out of the responsibility of asking ourselves, hey, what am I doing to contribute to this situation? What might I change in this situation, right? So we play the blame game. Third reason I think we do this is this. We actually think it helps. We think it helps. We think that people sitting out there like, they need our insights. They need our view of things. They're just so lost. And if all I could do, if they would just listen to me and they would hear my criticisms and hear the things that I'm pointing out and hear the mistakes that they're making, then they would change and everything would be great, right? That's what we think. We think it actually helps. But let me ask you this. When's the last time somebody approached you with that kind of negative, critical, fault-finding, picking kind of way of being, and it helped you? When's the last time you had that experience? Anybody? Anybody ever had? Now, I'm not talking about a good, healthy situation like a good coach or somebody that you're actually asking for feedback from. I'm talking about that critical, negative, nitpicking thing. Anybody ever been helped by that? How about this? Have you ever been helped by a supportive, loving relationship where you know that somebody's got you, they've got your back? And yeah, maybe there's some constructive things you could offer there. Ever been helped by that? So the truth is, it feels to us as if all of this criticizing and fault-finding is helping. It relieves me. I think it's going to, people, if everybody would just listen to me, the world would be such a better place, right? But in fact, it makes things worse. It blinds us to our own faults and flaws, which we might actually be able to do something about. It fosters divisions. And listen to this, it keeps us from loving people the way that Jesus calls us to love them. And I think that's the most important thing here. It keeps us from loving people. So what's the alternative? And Jesus does offer us an alternative. So he goes on and says this. First, take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your neighbor's eye. So have you all ever heard this? It's a helpful little thing I learned years ago, that when you point one finger at somebody else, how many fingers are pointing back at you? You ever notice that? How many? 3, making sure you all are awake out there. Okay, so you point. If I point at Lamar, I go, Lamar! I've got 3 fingers pointing back at myself. And in some ways, I think this is what Jesus is telling us to do. Whenever we find ourselves beginning to criticize others, he says, look, turn that gaze inward. Turn it towards self-examination. And what are some things that we might ask ourselves when we find ourselves criticizing others? Here's one. Am I being harder on them than I am on myself? Like, I will confess to you, I'm guilty of that quite a bit. I'm harder on other people than I am on myself. And a lot of times I'll see myself reflecting if I've criticized somebody or said, well, they're not doing this or they're doing that. And at some point in time when I think to myself, I go, well, Brady, you're not doing that either. Or you're doing the exact same thing that they're doing. So who are you to criticize and find fault with them? Favorite expression I learned years ago, there's just something about that person I really hate about myself. Right? It's just so easy to see it in other people. But what about in me? The second thing I think we have to ask as Christians, and especially as we come to the table of grace this morning, is this. Am I offering the same mercy that I would want if I was in their shoes? Do you want to be judged by your worst moment? Anybody here want to be judged for your worst moment, your worst day? Right? Well, why would you do that to somebody else? People are complex. There's a lot of things going on in people's lives. Do I extend the same grace to others that I would hope to receive when I've got something wrong or when I've made a mistake? Right? So I've talked about an organization that's been meeting in Baton Rouge for the last 6-7 months called Braver Angels, and they've met here at our church multiple times. And it's an organization that seeks to depolarize our political conversations, to kind of get us out of this name-calling and fault-finding. And they offer a workshop called Depolarizing Within, and some of our members participated in that here a while back. But it offers some, again, insight or insightful questions that we can ask when we find ourselves really in these political divisions. So here's one for you. How often do I find myself assigning mainly self-serving or negative motives to the other side while ascribing positive motives to my own side? Like, well, my side's completely good and got everything right, and that other side, how often do I find myself doing that? Here's one. How often do I find myself focusing on the most extreme or outrageous ideas and people on the other side thereby making it hard to see how a reasonable person could be a part of that group, right? I mean, right? Y'all do that? You find the most extreme person, the most extreme idea, and you point that out and you say, that's the whole group, and how could anybody believe that or think that? Ever find yourself doing that? Or this one really got me, because I like a good joke. It says this, how often do I feel a rush of pleasure with friends when we ridicule those crazies on the other side? And here's the thing I've learned, because we are a congregation of diverse perspectives and I get to talk to people all the time about these kinds of things. You know that the other side is laughing at you and saying, you're crazy too, right? Right? Jesus is encouraging us whenever we find ourselves turning that kind of critical lens on others to make it sure we take a moment, step back, and look within ourselves and ask, where is my heart in this, right? Now, some people read this teaching of Jesus's and they think this. Okay, so Jesus says, if I take the plank out of my eye, then I can criticize other people, right? And so, okay, I'm going to go do 3 therapy sessions. I'm going to do a deep dive in my own motives, and then I am free to come and unleash my wisdom upon the world, right? Then I can tell everybody what I think, and then is that what Jesus is saying? What do y'all think? Right. So here's what I would suggest, and this comes from Dallas Willard. He says this, and I always love this interpretation of this. He says, the plank in my eye, the log in my eye, is the desire that I have to go around and fault find and nitpick and scorekeep with the world around me. That's the plank. It's that thing inside of me that wants to judge. We might say, if you know your New Testament, it's the inner Pharisee, it's the inner critic, again, that inner accountant, the inner scorekeeper, right? That's the log, that's the plank. And get this, when I remove that, or when Christ removes it, then I no longer have the desire to go around and criticize and pick and find fault with others. I've been freed from that. And I want you to imagine something. Can you imagine being liberated from that? That constant fault-finding voice that we turn on ourselves and that we turn on others? Because in the end, listen to this, while that voice and while that way of thinking is good for problem solving and fixing things, people are not problems to be solved or problems to be fixed. People are beings to be what? Loved. Where did we start? Loved. In the end, loving our neighbors as ourselves, really doing that, means that I should treat other people the way that I want to be treated, or the way that I treat myself. So C.S. Lewis does this brilliantly. He says this, there is someone that I love, even though I don't approve of what he does. There is someone I accept, even though his thoughts and actions revolt me. There is someone I forgive, though he hurts the people I love the most. That person is me. Think about it. If I can give myself that kind of grace, as a Christian person, what am I called to do? To give that kind of grace to others. Now, I do want to be clear about a few things, and this is important. I don't think that Jesus is saying that we should not assess what is good and helpful from what is evil and harmful. I think we have to do that. So Jesus isn't saying don't judge a situation, don't assess a situation, don't make decisions about what's good or what's bad. I mean, we have to make those kinds of decisions. What he's saying is, in the process of doing that, don't condemn another human being. Don't other or demonize another human being. Similarly, I don't think Jesus is saying that we shouldn't stand up or speak out about right and wrong in the world. I think we have to do that. We're called to do that. But is what we're calling out policies? Is what we're calling out ideas? Or are we name-calling? And are we making ad hominem attacks? And are we attacking people? Do you get the difference? We have to stand up and talk about things that matter. I heard a leader in our city a few months ago on the radio, and I thought the way that she was approaching this was brilliant. So someone was trying to catch her to say that some of the legislators, the people at the Capitol, are racist. that the people are racist. And she refused to fall into that. And what she kept saying is, she says, let's talk about the ideas. Let's talk about the policies and how these might be hurting minority groups. But she was in a place where she was refusing to name call those people. Because let me ask you this, when you're being name called and when you're being singled out and when you're being criticized, what chance is there that you're going to come to the table and actually try to work something out? Right? Braver angels, one more, I'm sorry, got to say this. I also want to be clear and say this. I don't think when we're talking about mercy and we're talking about forgiveness and all that, I don't think that Jesus is calling us to subject ourselves to abuse. So there are abusive relationships out there. There are. And this would be my advice if you find yourself in that kind of a situation. Get out of it. Get away. If you need help, call me, call the church. It may be that once you have protected yourself, then we can talk about your Christian duty to love and to forgive. But I don't think Jesus is saying sit in there and subject yourself to abuse. So the most important thing in all of this is that our hearts not become hardened towards others. That's where we get in danger. Organization Braver Angels again says this: the person who disagrees with you is not your enemy. They are a fellow human being. And that's one of the most important things for me. If we're going to love our neighbors, we must remember that they are people just like we are. So today is World Communion Sunday, and we're going to come and gather around this table. And as we do, it's important to remember that just as we are diverse in this room, that there is a diverse population of Christians all across this world. Again, different languages, different cultures, different ways of looking at these situations. And yes, different political views and different political backgrounds. And when we gather around this table, we come united in Christ. And I would suggest to you, united in our need for God's love and God's grace. So as we come to this table, I want to invite you to a few self-reflection questions. So how quick are you to criticize and point out others' faults? How quick? Is there someone you've been overly critical of? What might change if you offered them a little grace? Are you willing to be honest with yourself and examine your own heart and your own motives? And finally, can you think of a time that you needed forgiveness, that you needed forgiveness? Are you willing to extend that same mercy and grace to others? As we approach this table of grace, I invite you to lay down the weight of judgment and to enter into loving your neighbor as you love yourself. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.